So when I program, what I do is I've got the outcome from the syllabus, I've got the life skills aligned lesson, and then I actually plan for a follow-up activity myself that's for the class that relates to that lesson. So for example, last week we did one around understanding perspectives, and the lesson I did on that to bring it back to their world was for example, we have different opinions on things. For example, you might like this animal, I might like that animal. It's okay that we like different animals, or foods, or things that became relevant to their own life that highlighted the point, I guess, about different, considering others' perspectives. So that's how I have programmed for it in a support unit setting, but it varies class to class. This term, I'm actually doing less of the follow-up activities and delving deeper into the life skills content itself. That's just how I guess to me, it's very, very flexible.
And so approximately how many students do you have per class when you're running a support unit class?
Yeah, so we in our classes have anywhere between 6 to 8 students in our class at one time. Yeah.
And when you're using the platform, what have you found has been best practice for your group?
In my experience, I always run it as a whole class, because I feel as though in our setting, the students' needs within the class are quite similar. So I like to do it as a modelled lesson and take them through it. Then we do the guided experience, which is I actually stop at each point during the video and have a talking point and engage the class in a discussion, or just sort of highlight something that I'm going to come back to later in the follow-up activity. And then I push them out with an independent activity. Now, for some students, it may be that they then actually go on their own device and complete the lesson themselves. For most of the students, though, because we have just done it as a model, I'll usually push them out with an independent hands-on activity. It might be if it's around interacting with others that we actually play a turn-taking game, or if it's around emotions, we might be, like the other day we did a lesson where we took photos of everyone showing different emotions. So what they then use that as a reference point. The lesson I did just the day before, was with our senior support unit class, and it was around the STOP method. So looking at how you recognize your emotions, and that had come out as a result of an incident that had happened at lunchtime. So that was not the lesson I had planned, but given there was a situation at lunchtime, I went straight into that lesson instead.
And I think, I am incredibly, grateful for the relationship that we have with your school, and particularly for the amount of time and work and effort that navigating right from conception right through to now roll out to quite a large product. How, if you were speaking to someone that was looking at rolling this out, say specifically in a learning support unit, what would you say that the top 3 things that they should consider and the benefits would be for them?
So when you say learning support, you're talking about specifically students with special needs. We've got learning support in our school, which are children that are supported in our mainstream. And then we've got our support unit classes. You mean the support unit itself?
Special needs.
Special needs, okay. So that's a good question. Let me think. I think the main thing I would say is that that they should be considering the program to be a flexible one. I have programmed for 10 weeks of lessons, 1 lesson a week. But what I have done is, while I have put them in what I think to be a sequential order, I actually, both last term and this term, have moved them around based on point of need. So as I just gave the example, that was around managing self-regulation, I think that lesson was that I did, around the STOP strategy, that came off the bat of needing a student to de-escalate after an incident at lunch. And we talked about what choices we could make instead and what strategies we could use. So the first thing would be that keep in mind it's a flexible program, that you just at point of need can pick it up and go with it. I used to do that a lot last year. I had a child doing some integration into my class who was in the mainstream but had additional needs trauma background. And if there had been incidents on the playground, he would usually come to me and we would just drop everything and pick up a 20-minute lesson. And that was usually a starting point for the conversation. Because when he's in that moment, he didn't want to talk about it or didn't want to, me to tell him the strategies that I thought he needed to use. But once it got brought down into like the cartoon version and the hands-on activities and a little meditation, he actually calmed down and we could engage on that level. That's probably the first thing I would say, just keep in mind it's flexible. The second thing I'd probably suggest is looking at the needs of your students. So we have access to the K-6 curriculum, but even though there might be a child in the class that's in year 6, he actually is working at a K-2 level, know that it is flexible to be able to assign the relevant content as far as developmental ability. So I do that. They're still exposed to the outcomes of the PDHP syllabus, but the actual lessons are then set at their level. And the other thing I found really useful this year is, I guess, just having a point of where you're going to go with it. So I've done my whole 10 weeks around self-management and self-regulation. And last term I did it around understanding perspectives and understanding thoughts and feelings of others and things like that. So trying to give them a little bit of insight into how other people operate. And then this term, based on needs, I've gone down the path a little bit more around self-regulation and management. So having, I think, a forward plan of where you want to go with it as well, so you're really maximising and using the lessons effectively.
Yeah, no,
I think
probably
my top 3 tips. Yeah,
no, they were really good. And in regards to what have been the benefits, so you've sort of been on this journey with us for a while now and would have kind of a good reflection. What have been the benefits for you as a teacher, or that you've heard from your other teachers, of having this system there at your fingertips?
Okay, I will speak about our whole school in this situation, because I actually think that we are embedding it really effectively in our mainstream. It's being, this year we have actually started embedding it, so every grade has been assigned content and we're making sure we're all speaking the same language. That has been a huge benefit. So if in week 3 we're learning about managing emotions, all the teachers are in week 3 talking the same language. And so points, we're picking up things in the playground and we might reference the particular lesson. So it's using that common language. That's been fantastic. The other thing that has been so great with particularly our mainstream students, or those sort of pointy end students, is the weather report. So we have got teachers that are using that daily with children who are with concern maybe about their home life, or we're concerned about their well-being. They check in every single morning on that. And I actually was only speaking to a teacher about this last week, and she just said how beneficial that has been to actually tune into that child. He's a very quiet child. He's got a lot going on. And he doesn't necessarily want to offer that information to her, but through the weather check-in, and she said it's pretty accurate. So that's been a really big benefit for us, I would say, across the school. I think getting everyone on board has been a big journey. It's sort of, we rolled it out and we sort of let everyone try it and see how they went with it. And I think now we've really implemented it across the board, as far as, this is what we're doing in term 3. These are the 10 lessons you do. You can do extra lessons. That's not a problem. You can, if you've had an incident with your class that day, you might pull a lesson out, not a problem. But as far as our stage, having that consistency, that's only something we've gone to this term for the first time.
And I think that's a really interesting, and this is just purely for my benefit. We were talking about this internally last night, that, you were one of the only 8 schools that we were piloting when we were building. And we understand that schools are really individual, and the needs of schools are individual, and the needs of teachers are individual. Yet, and we, initially had that whole open system where you could just basically build whatever you want. And it's interesting, like watching, the way that you're using it and the way that schools are using it. I think if we kind of fast forward a few years down the track now, I think having set, we have our scope and sequence, we have the alignment to the curriculum, you have your general capabilities, having that set structure with flexibility to be able to meet the needs of a daily event or something that's coming up. From our end, looks like, we want it to be all kind of open and kind of encompassing, but I'm realizing that those units and setting them in a rhythm and a flow, and also just having it like, this is what we do at this term, this is what we do. What would you, with new teachers coming in, so I suppose, initially, we were sort of juggling our way through working out how the system worked. But when you have new teachers arriving into the school now, how are you finding they're adopting the platform and their understanding of how to use it is when they start with you?
Look, that's a good question. We actually were so lucky because you came out, Nikki, and did a lot of the training with us. So we haven't had any teachers, I guess, that have needed to jump on partway through. Might have had 1 or 2. But with that said, it's a very user-friendly platform, because I haven't had any questions about how to use it, and I know they're using it. So that's probably a good indication that it's quite easy to use. They will sometimes from time to time come and ask me about a particular feature or how to see something in their class or whatnot. But typically we don't have too many issues with that. The stage supervisors planned the units of work with the team, and I, as the school administrator, then put them in and allocated them out to classes so they could use that. But yeah, and I guess it appears in their lesson, and they know in my program in week 3 I'm teaching this, so they click on the lesson and there it is. So it's very easy.
It's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. Have you worked with the platform with any non-verbal students?
Yeah, we have. So of my class last year, I had 8 students. Probably half of them would be considered non-verbal. Look, it does present its challenges in the sense that not typically. Some students who are non-verbal also have difficulty processing information and taking it in. So they may have a receptive communication delay as well as an expressive one. So obviously anything you present to a child like that is more difficult for them to understand. I do think the fact that it is so interactive and cartoon-based, though, engaged them. I had a student who, because she loved YouTube and loved songs and things, would quite like that. We also do the life skills program, the yoga program. So there's strategies used like around the hand on heart and the breathing and sitting down. They were familiar with that because we did that in term 1. So those processes were in place already in my class. As far as then when the lesson was over, I had to go with the majority of my class, I guess, as far as the delivery of the content. So if I had 8 students, I did the K to 2 lesson. I might then push out 5 of those students and do a follow-up activity that was at their level, and I might push out my 2 or 3 non-verbal students and do a different activity for them. So, for example, an activity we did was last year, I'm just thinking around sharing emotions, looking at emotions. So I got my students who are higher ability to, for example, draw themselves looking at different emotions and write something that may have made them feel that way. Whereas the non-verbal students, we took photos of them with a happy face, a sad face, and we made them their own little chart. So that's just one way I differentiated the content for that class.
It's really beautiful. I think one of the greatest memories I've ever had, I mean, there's many that I've had when we've been, looking at content and students over the years of developing it. I think my favorite was the empathy class that you ran one day and shared with me. And I don't know if you remember it the way I remember, like I actually got goosebumps right now. Teaching complex, concepts like that, particularly, how has that been and what has the platform helped or supported you with?
Oh, look, actually, I have to say, so the classes I'm doing it with this year are quite high functioning students with autism overall. And so they're quite verbal and quite capable academically and things, but socially there are deficits there because they have autism. That is one part of that disorder. So understanding things like empathy is just so difficult for them typically because they see it from their perspective. It's like, yes, I might see that person crying, but I don't know why they're crying, or they shouldn't feel that way because I'm the one who's actually hurt. So trying to make sense of it is quite difficult and something we navigate all the time with the students. I think Life Skills Go has been a really nice way to open up the conversation, to use common language. So I have just noticing the kids, we did a lesson even on resilience the other day, and that's something that's really hard to put into words, what it means to be resilient, because for them a lot feels challenging all the time. And, I'm really open when I do the lessons, and so are the SLSOs I work with. So I always share my own experiences. So I was talking about my own personal experience the other day and saying how I'd had a really bad morning and how I wasn't feeling great. So I had to use the stop strategy and observe my own breathing and what strategies I used to actually get back on track and be ready to walk in and teach a class. And they understood that concept. And I think it's unusual for them to hear a teacher share things like that. So I'm always quite open and honest with them in my own experiences as well, and give them examples. So if they do need that little bit of prompting, something that might trigger a thought for them. But I do think concepts like empathy, interpersonal relations, they really get it. And it's interesting. It's one of those things where I'm seeing them applied in context, and that's how I know there's been that transference. So it's not just I'm sitting here for 25 minutes doing a Life Skills Go lesson on empathy. We then push out to an activity. And the way one of the students, I think this is the story you're talking about, way one of the students referenced it was the thoughts are going from my brain to their brain. And he actually drew an image of
that was it.
2 brains connecting. And he said it's 2 brains connecting. And that was his understanding of empathy. And he's a student who very, very much struggles with that concept.
Yeah, no, I remember that. I just remember seeing it, and I think you'd posted something on your school page, and I just sat there and I was like, that was just an incredible, incredible moment to see that they're understanding and being able to understand, and others are understanding. So it was a beautiful thing. So I think, you've worked tirelessly, you and Kerry, at really, putting wellbeing and social emotional learning, not only for the students, but the teachers at the front and foremost of your school. What have been, if you were, sort of, I suppose, providing some of the lessons that have helped you to get to where you've got to today, what would you say has been the key learning that you would implement straight off to make sure it was a whole school approach?
I would say that one thing we did at the beginning was let everyone sort of dabble with it. Because it was a new platform, because we were a pilot school, we sort of said, go in, get your feel for it, see what, suits your class, and sort of do what you think, do what you feel. What that led to was people not implementing it consistently, which meant some students were getting it and some students weren't. As we became more refined in our approach, I guess we were able to actually narrow down, well, what are we targeting? We looked at our data as well and looked at where we were having incidents, or students were getting suspended, for example. What skills did we need to target? Why were they suspended? Were they suspended because they were having a disagreement on the playground that led to physical violence, or were they just suspended because they were just continually disobedient in class, and then that's going into respect? So we looked at what the data was showing us and where we wanted to align our lessons for this term. We have done it before as a different approach, and we've sort of said, look, we map out the unit of work for the term, but every teacher could pick their own unit of work. But what that meant was as well, the kids were getting the same content. They may have gone to the teacher next year and got the same content again. So we really wanted to make sure we had a streamlined approach, I guess, this year. That would be one of the big things I think is working really well. And we've made our teachers accountable for it. So we've put in their program reviews, checking their day books. We are doing one lesson a week, and it's this particular lesson. So as I said, they can do more if they want, and we encourage that. But as a class, this is one lesson a week. We stop, we teach PDHPA content explicitly as a whole class.
That's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And I think, I'm making this up, but I imagine that they're particularly, like if we look at where we are right now, coming towards the end of August, it's been a very big year. I imagine that there's a lot of pressure to teach, the KLAs and a lot of other areas. And yet, I know that we're very passionate about wellbeing. What would you say to other schools and other teachers that are, sort of looking at putting this off till next year?
We actually sent home all of our life skills Go codes during COVID for all of the students to be doing at home. So I see this as a huge priority. We actually, when we came back from COVID, so the current situation in New South Wales is we don't actually have to teach all the curriculum this year. So we can actually choose what we want to teach and what we see as important. Now, obviously, there was a big focus when we came back on reading, writing and maths, because our kids hadn't done that for weeks when they'd been at home to the same extent, hadn't had instruction in it. But we had just as big a focus on life skills Go. We actually planned for a lesson every day when we returned from COVID.
Wow.
So we did a life skills Go focus. It wasn't that we necessarily taught a lesson a day, but we might have done the lesson on the Monday, followed up with an activity on the Tuesday. We did that over the week for the first few weeks that we came back on site, because we were really concerned about the students and their wellbeing. So I would say definitely get on board this year. There would be no reason to wait. I think also looking at there has schools, we've got so many competing demands, but even if you were to get on board and try it, and then look at how we implement it. So you're not trying that in term one and getting used to it in term one to then roll it out in term 2 or 3. So I think, it's, as I said, very, very user friendly. Our families were able to use it at home, the students, I should say, sorry. And we're in a non-English speaking community. So the fact they could get on, use the QR code to scan on a device and do the lesson was great.
Beautiful. And I just want to say once again, thank you. I think, we love working with your community. We're very lucky to be able to see what, the benefits, and also, I don't think that we could say thank you enough for your flexibility to be able to, you hold so many lessons in, the way that we've directed it, and also a lot of instruction around product features. And I hope that you look at product and think, oh my gosh, I suggested that. And I think that's part of growing as an organisation and working hand in hand with schools, is that, we really want to be able to save your teachers time, be, a subject matter specialist in a box, but that they can draw out and use and measure information. So I think that's about it from me. I just
Yeah, no, I will just say on that though, Nikki, we have been so lucky to work with you guys. I feel like the service that you give us, like I've said this to you before many times, I just have to pick up a phone or send an email and something is done immediately. And I understand that we have a very close working relationship, but the staff that I have dealt with, you know, at the moment I'm working with Jack in particular a lot for different things. We've done teacher professional learning. We've done so much with life skills in so many areas, and every time it's very, very easy. So anytime there's a bit of feedback, for example, during COVID, I did give some feedback on something that I thought would be a really easy feature, but I can't quite remember what it was, but it was something.
I remember.
Oh,
I
what was
remember.
it?
It was no, but it was awesome because I mean we hadn't built for remote learning.
Mm-hmm.
It was, could we please download the QR codes as a class
Yes.
to be able to individually send out to teachers? And it's like,
so something so which to me, I was clicking every single QR code. I just thought, I'll just see if this is an option. And pretty much, I think it was less than 24 hours we had that option. So I do see that you guys are super responsive to school needs. And that is something that has been fantastic because we are, you know, I myself wear so many different hats. And this is just managing life skills across the school is just one very small part of my role. It is very, very easy to use and easy to work with you guys. So I appreciate that as well.